Well, a swift and direct warning from Washington to China. Marine Corps Lieutenant General Kenneth McKenzie says the U.S. has a lot of experience in the Western Pacific taking down small islands. Now, this warning comes after China dispatched warships to confront two U.S. naval vessels that were traveling near those man-made Chinese islands that we know now have been heavily militarized there in the South China Sea. Here now to discuss, Zuhdi Jasser, retired U.S. Navy Lieutenant Commander, and Don Bramer, a former Naval Intelligence Officer, also former Joint Special Ops Task Force. Don, let me start with you on this because we sort of have been caught up in this whole negotiations with North Korea, China on trade. Meanwhile, we know that the belligerence of China that began under the last administration with these man-made islands on full display. They have militarized these islands. They continue to be a real threat to the neighbors who are saying that they have imperialistic ambitions.
Well, if you look forward, I mean, you're right. In 2016, this was a huge issue that the previous administration was dealing with, and I think that China seems to be taking advantage that we're looking in the other direction right now. You know, we're worried with North Korea, we're doing the Chinese trade deals, so there's other issues that they're just trying to step in, sneak around, and see what they can get away with, and thinking we won't do much about it.
You know, of course, Zuhdi, when you hear you know, someone, a high-ranking a military official in America talk about our success back then, we're talking World War II and, you know, Yap, Tinian, Guam, those places where we had to go and defeat an enemy in almost hand-to-hand combat toward the end. But this might be a little bit different. Certainly, China now poses a bigger threat every single year, don't they?
They do pose a larger.
Sorry, Zuhdi.
Sorry about that.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things we're seeing now is for all the left's talk about how the world is becoming more chaotic, actually, this is the only way to speak to powers like China is peace through strength. And we're sort of recalibrating that loss. You remember, I'll remind you, Charles, the last administration talked about an Asia pivot. That never happened because these man-made islands don't happen overnight. Now they're landing nuclear-capable airplanes that can threaten the region. The Chinese want to hegemonize the South Asia Sea, and ultimately our allies. You saw Vice President Pence visit Indonesia. They've met with him multiple times. So we're trying to rebalance a loss of power that America had over the last 8 years before President Trump, and now we're recalibrating sort of a presence for Taiwan, for Vietnam, for Indonesia, many of the countries that we have sort of abandoned. Now we're trying to re-strengthen and push China back from that hegemonization of the region.
And to that point, Don, we know that as part of the North Korean negotiations and as part of the trade negotiations, China is really trying to carve out that sort of dominance that Zuhdi is talking about, saying, hey, perhaps we can get North Korea to denuclearize, but you guys have got to pull back. Let us have the South Pacific. Let us have this region. It's naturally ours, and you know, we're going to be the dominant force anyway. That's the way it feels like it's playing out.
Well, I think that's exactly the way that China would like for it to play out. I think, you know, they've had a posture where they've expected us for the last decade in the previous administration to sit back. And now we're at a point where we have a president that doesn't play by the rules that they've been used to, and they're thinking that this North Korea situation might be that opportunity for them to have a little leverage. I don't see it quite playing out that way. Admiral Harris said that we were looking that these would be a challenge coming in, and so does the current Admiral Davidson.
Zuhdi, we do know that President Trump was really irritated about the second meeting Kim Jong-un had with President Xi that no one knew about. And during that meeting, they unveiled a new aircraft carrier, certainly a powerful display of their goals and their ambitions, right?
Yeah, and this is why it's so important that you're covering this right now, Charles, because this is not a coincidence that our military leaders, our joint chiefs and our generals and admirals are making comments about our ability to do what we did with the Japanese in World War II, which was sort of hop, skip islands and destroy them, because we're sort of making the Chinese know that, yes, they may have helped the North Koreans come to the table,
right,
but we are not going to be beholden to them if we come to a solution with North Korea and let go
right
of our balance in the region. And that's very important as we approach the talks.
Gentlemen, thank you both.